wait a minute. Yeah, keep me right there, everybody, wait a minute. Everybody, wait a minute. Well, everybody, wait a minute. Sunshine, sunshine. Well, everybody, wait a minute. Yeah, but everybody, wait a minute. Yeah, keep me right there. Everybody, wait a minute. Well, everybody, wait a minute. Well, everybody, wait a minute. Well, everybody, wait a minute. Sunshine, sunshine. Well, everybody, wait a minute. Yeah, but everybody, wait a minute. Yeah, keep me right there. Everybody, wait a minute.
They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You play any and every position. Coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh my goodness, I see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like Live right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, clearly out of practice already, fresh off of a very exhausting but wonderful week abroad, which we'll talk a little bit about this morning. But it's good to be back. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me and us, all the remixers. Shout out to all of you. Please do jump in, invite others to join you. There was a little bit of confusion, but I do believe Dr. Rebecca Hall is going to join us in the second hour at 9 a.m. to talk about her book, Wake, The Untold Story of Women-Led Slave Revolts, which I was reading all throughout the trip and on the flights to and from, and anyway, so welcome, Mia. Thank you for joining. Peace, Emma. James, welcome. Quaker Anarchist, our biggest social media supporter. Welcome. Leah, peace, everybody. Thanks for joining us. What's up, Ricky? Yes, indeed. Peace, Africans. So I'm a lot exhausted. The trip back was a little bit more tiring than I would have thought. Full and replete with lost luggage and all kinds of, all the kinds of good stuff that comes with international travel. With a group of 8, right? Eight or 9 of us, with elders, with middle-aged, broken folks. I mean, it was just, children. It was just a lot, but it was wonderful. And I do want to talk a little bit about that in this first hour. So I put together a sort of an outline of things to discuss with you all, bring up a little bit. And I know that there's a lot of important things happening, some things I've missed, some things that I'm behind on. So I will just beg folks' forgiveness on that. But I want to start first off with shout out to both my youngest daughter and my mother, who today is their birthday. Both of them share a birthday. So big shout out to Marley and Mama Arnett, and happy birthday and many more. Although I think Marley's going to be a little bit disappointed because the celebration that she was expected to be on the exact day of her birthday just happened all week long. So it's kind of like this year is going to be kind of like the people who have a birthday on, Christmas or whatever. So it's going to be a little bit doubled up. Shout out to Ghana, who just kicked off against South Korea. Yes, I am. World Cup on in the background, paying attention to it all throughout the trip. Being in Paris while France plays and hanging out with Pan-Africans who don't give a damn. All of it was a fascinating wave of contradictions. I'll talk more about that shortly. Apparently there was this horrific nightclub shooting that I'm seeing is likely, encouraged, inspired by some of the right-wing anti-LGBTQ stuff. I don't pretend to know much about it. But we do need to be aware of what's being encouraged and what is being invited out here. So anyway, I don't think that that's the way to demonstrate your. Anyway, obviously it's just terrible. I'm a little too tired and unprepared for that one to say much more on that, other than I heard about it and it's whack. And yes, Emma, this is live. Yeah, Paris, so one thing I just want to reiterate. So shout out to the Remix Morning Shows I brought up the other day, because a couple people, I get it. We all are at moments self-righteous in our radicalism. But if I post something about my children taking a picture where the Eiffel Tower's in the background, remember what social media is, first of all, besides propaganda and psychological warfare. It's usually us presenting very limited, narrow moments of our lives. Many of the things that we say or do are not recorded or not documented. I know most of what I say or do, despite even being on here, is not documented or recorded. So I don't feel it's necessary to post every single thing about every single thing about every single thing. And I also don't think that on those posts that's where you should unleash your vitriol and disgust with my politics and representing imperialism by being in front of the Eiffel Tower or whatever and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So I admit and I'm willing to discuss my own contradictions in an appropriate time, in an appropriate context, and with people who have an appropriate level of genuine interest in having forward-leaning discussions, as they might say, about it. But and where I know who you are, and where your contradictions might also be put forth, So I just don't think that's the place. So as I just said recently, Clay Davis to all of that. And, erase and delete, block, that's not what it is. That's not what it's up for. So, anyway, I just wanted to say that part again, real quick. I also want to very quickly, before we get, because I want to come back to all of this, but I want to just, one other very serious note, that I have, listed here in my notes, aside from that nightclub shooting, is the pending death of Kevin Johnson. And I see Kalanji is hosting with Dr. Joy James a discussion on our channel. In fact, let me just pull this up here and get the exact. Please go to our channel and make sure you have your bells and whistles all clicked and whatever, because it's special broadcast tomorrow at 11 a.m., featuring Dr. Joy James and Dylan Rodriguez with Kalanji. So please do tune in for that, and let's whatever noise we can try to make in support of Kevin Johnson's the revocation of his death sentence. Let's try to do that. Okay. All right, let's do some silliness in advance of a more serious conversation we're going to have with Dr. Rebecca Hall in the second hour. Africa in Paris was the note I made. Africans in Paris, of course, in my head, punning off of Jay-Z and Kanye's infamous Ends in Paris. And if you never caught it, please, Yassine Bey's response to that, what did he title it? Somebody in the chat know. He did a response to Jay-Z and Kanye's rhyming on their beat that I used to play in my classroom all the time, and he killed it. But he was just basically clowning them, saying, black people getting it all over, and you're doing this whole silly thing about being ends in Paris with all this money. Was it like poor ends and poor or something? I can't remember what he did with it, but yeah, okay. Yeah, no doubt. And that's the contradiction, because watching Kylian Mbappe play, woof, and I'm going to come there. I do have something I want to say about the World Cup real quick and that contradiction, and which was live and direct the other day. But anyway, the Africans in Paris. First of all, so kind of going off of what I was just saying a moment ago about people being critical of what they saw on my Instagram, was that shout out to the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Shout out to Brother Kosi in particular, who sort of welcomed me and introduced me and reintroduced me and walked me through the sort of African diaspora doorway that exists everywhere we go. So it goes back to, so again, this point that came up a couple weeks ago when I first mentioned I'd be taking this trip. And, this idea that, oh, why are you going to Europe and this, that, and the third. So first of all, I've been all over the continent. Let's just be clear on that. Second of all, it's a family thing. I'm not in charge of any of it. I was very much a passenger. Shout out to the we talking later about women-led revolts. Shout out to the women-led trips. Everything was meticulously planned, even time for me to be off and doing my thing, anyway, but my point really is that you find what you're looking for. And if you are politically either connected or inclined or culturally connected or inclined, you can be in other places, and the diaspora is live and direct and often in struggle. So it was I ended up engaging with folks, many of them younger than me, more engaged than me, more intellectually, strong and clear, and reminiscent of that time, and I'm not meaning to be cliched here, but there is that time where you are of physical, and physical and the mental health all are connected, obviously, but you have that strength and that energy and that freshness, and the everything is firing on all its cylinders. Many times you're just single or less encumbered. No, it's just different. So I love that energy. And then just to be around, it's Senegalese, Mali was in the house, Congo was very well represented, the Caribbean, all the saints, Black America, everybody was in the house. And it was a world apart. They didn't give a damn. They were the diaspora versions of Brother Diallo. They didn't care about the ball chasers. They weren't interested in this or that. They weren't interested. It was a whole different, sitting down with a brother who's from the Congo who speaks, and then all of that, all the languages. It is very humbling to be in a room with people who are going from one dialect, one language, this, that, boom, 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 and I'm sitting there, translations needed. But new perspectives, stuff I'm not up on. So for just one quick example, we're sitting down to dinner. First of all, Brother Kosi, shout out to them. I live in a world where where good cooking is a staple, but he laid something out with a chef's background. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Everything. And vegan. Hooked it up. There's never been a better time in the world to be a vegan. And oh my goodness. But he introduces me to this brother who is in the academic world, but sort of our style of engagement with it. And I do intend to ask Dr. Hall about her experiences, which she talks a little bit about when she joins us in the next hour, which I believe is still the plan. So, for instance, one of the things I did get to go to, I went to Presence Africaine bookstore, which had always been a thing for me. Got a couple of got a copy of Diop's Federated States book in French that I'm giving to my daughters who are learning French. A book from Fanon that I had not been familiar with, and the title escapes me off the top. Also in French, that I've gifted to the girls who are more advanced. They'll have to carry this on and help me out. But the point was this brother was saying that, I have not read Diop. I read all of the English translations of all of his stuff, but it's been 20, 30 years now. And I haven't kept up with the particular study of all the related fields. So when he says, that a lot of historians said that he got stuff wrong, even as their politics and reasoning are ignoble in and of themselves, and that there's a lot of updated research that says Diop wasn't really on point with everything that we thought he was. I'm fascinated by that, and I'm not able to keep up. I don't know if he's right or wrong. I told him my inclination is to say, come on now. But that could be just the defensiveness, and of course, why would we think that in 30 years no one could advance upon his thinking, So, but anyway, my point really is that anywhere we are, there doesn't have to be, there's no, relatively speaking, no confusion on the issue. The diaspora has been created. We get it. It exists, but you can find it. And it was soda. I mean, it was really soda the whole trip. It was a beautiful thing. By the way, Kosi also had made it possible for me to almost connect with Muriel Fanon, but we weren't able to finally make that work. But maybe we'll connect, and she'll join us at some point in the next year. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up and make that point. It was great. It was great, and I loved being around folks who humble me intellectually. I enjoy it. Molly was in the building. I mean, it was dope, and to hear from their perspectives, a little bit about what's up in the world. And thankfully, that backwards hashtag, none of them had heard about any of that. So I was like, okay, we see who they're clearly targeting, but hey, Emma, I'm happy to follow your lead on that as well. So let me know how you do with things as well on your end of thing, on your side of things. But yeah, it was really dope. So shout out to the AAPRP for laying that groundwork. Jumped in the chat of my study group and said, hey, who's where, and got immediately connected, and it was great. By the way, 19th minute, first half, 0-0 South Korea, Ghana, just in case anybody else is worried about that. And the Ghanaian team, by the way, Inaki Williams, who plays in Spain, his brother plays for the national team of Spain. So there's a lot of those kind of fascinating stories too, and I'll be really interested to learn more about the family dynamic in the household on that. How one brother plays for Spain, one plays for Ghana, how they made that choice and why. No, I hear you, Troy. It was the particular nature of this, what I believe was a woman's aggressiveness on my Instagram. So I immediately blocked and erased. I was like, we're not having that. Same thing with when I come to the Killer Mike piece, somebody else did the same thing. I just erased all his stuff too. I'm not doing that. We're not doing. I don't owe in those little social media spaces. I don't owe the kind of name calling and hostility. Plenty of room for disagreement, and I'm good with that. But So anyway, it was dope. The whole thing was dope. There's all the problems still exist. Is you know, there's all the contradictions. Nothing. Everything. That's what I was telling. You know, somebody was asking me. You know, like when I come to the United States, what you know, where should I? And at this point, I'm really like, a city is a city is a city. And all I see are the discrepancies, and all I see are the people on the streets. In Paris, got plenty of them sleeping in the streets. All I see is the policing. All I see is the differences in for instance, where we went to stay, where you know, from where we stayed closer to the city center of Paris to where I went to visit, and you just see it's the same thing here. When I used to live in Northeast DC, if I got on the train at Metro Center, by the time we got out to my street, you could just see everybody. You could just watch all the white folks getting off the train, stop after stop after stop. And by the time you get to mine, not a white person in sight. Same thing here. Get on the train. By the time you get to where my man was staying, it was wildly overcrowded and entirely diaspora, African and Asian on the train, uncomfortably packed on the train, aggressively fighting one another for space on the train. African women putting African women off the train. I mean, it was, you know, it was like, you know, the contradictions are forced, and then all solidarity breaks down when it comes to traffic and trains. But it's the same. All that, you know, and so I was telling them that's all I end up seeing so you can't listen to me. You know, if you come into the States, obviously, you know, I don't know what to tell you. You know, go to New York, go to LA. I mean, I don't know. Cities are a city. You know, what is it that you want to do? You can find anything that you want, and that's what I was telling them. If you want to find the radical Africans, holler at me, and I'll help plug you in there. If you want to find the clubs and the this and that, I don't know what to tell you. They're everywhere, every kind of club. Everybody's doing everything. Just watch your back and have fun. The trains, blah, blah, blah. If you can figure out the train in New York, you can figure out the train in Paris, you can figure out the train in London. It's with all the technology and the amount of multilingual people, it's easier today. I mean, it's easier to figure everything out and get to, you know, so I was just like, I don't know, man, but you know, like, what do you want? Anyway. Yeah, so yeah, no doubt. You know, I was just thinking about Doc Ben. I was thinking about the day I got to spend with him when I was doing my thesis on Dr. Clark, which was a funny day. And you know, I got to, you know, he invited me because of Dr. James Turner, rest in power, on the strength of his Ghana scored 1-0 Ghana soda. But he invited me to his place in Harlem, and we spent the day where I got to see him teach lead a lecture to Harlem hospital students who admittedly, you know, honestly weren't as interested in it as I was. Went to his favorite diner, had a meal with him, went back to his house, his apartment, and that's where the mood shifted, and the fangs came out. So half of the interview is still up on imixwhatilike.org. I think the other half is lost to posterity, unfortunately. Back in the day with analog recordings and all of that. But he went from, you know, let's rap to, you know, he gave me the whole anti-light skin thing. He gave me the whole anti-Du Bois thing. He went in on Clark for being too close with the socialists. I mean, he was fully Doc Ben. He did not disappoint. And, you know, but rest in power to him as well. It was great. And then, you know, the off the record hate from other faculty when I reported the story back and they were even like, I won't say his name. He wouldn't have wanted me, but the whole, well, Doc Ben, look at the complexion of his wife. He talking about all the light skin. I was just like, oh man, we got so many issues. And shout out to Sybil Williams Clark, who I got to sit with, and I think half of her interview got lost, but is up on imixwhatilike.org, the half that remained. Strong woman, and really, anyway, I was grateful to have gotten to sit. Anyway, so let's press ahead because I want to do a couple things before Dr. Hall joins us, which I'm looking forward to, and I think it's happening here. So I just very quickly, only recently been introduced to the white, I guess, left podcast Chapo Trap House, and I was listening to some very interesting episodes. I have to admit, I appreciate, in terms of the Western world, the European world, their intellectualism, and then the Kanye stuff happened, and it was like, again, like the whole stuff with Kanye, I think, has really exposed the shortcomings and the fears of people's and the limitations of their analyses and what they is particularly what they know about black people. So as the white boys on Chapo Trap House had admitted that, they're deficient in the black world. So I was like, okay, cool. No, nobody's looking from you. When they had this very interesting discussion about the history of Europe and how England, in fact, that region became an island, and the history of the water flooding and the peninsula, the island being created, breaking from the peninsula, whatever, and what it would have meant had it remained landlocked with Europe. Historically, and they went into it was this fascinating discussion that I listened to on the flight. And then when it comes to Kanye, they're just like, oh, Black Hitler started, So I did post a comment, and I said, Black Hitler comments really expose the shortcomings of your, so I get it when you say, you don't want to just have black guests on because, to say you've had black guests, but you should at least read some black history and get some context as to why Black Hitler is a ridiculous comment. And the comments I got in response on their YouTube page were crazy and reminded me of why I'm with BPM and why I've never been interested in the interracial discussions about how and why I always struggled, honestly, with the white left and even the socialists, and why I was always, very, race first. Because I was like, I can't argue with white folks about these issues. And I'm not saying it's wrong to do, per se. I just can't do it. I have zero interest in it. So the responses that I was getting were just, so I just was like, okay, I don't even think I can watch the show anymore. I was like, because it reminded me, like, this is who you are talking to. And and even a black dude or self-professed, I don't know, got on there and was like, well, I'm black, and I think what you're saying, Kanye was ridiculous. And I didn't say anything. I only posted the one, and I didn't even mention Kanye. So I wasn't defending Kanye, which is, again, my point. But anyway. So I was just like, it just was a reminder of where race can become such an inhibiting force on people who are clearly thoughtful, well-read, and in their own traditions, but wildly and even willfully ignorant when it comes to the African world. And that's when I'm like, okay, I can't. So now I don't even think I can listen to the show anymore. And I actually really enjoyed it as a little, And then I watched R.M. Brown go on with the Sam Cedar show on Majority Report, and I'm like, man, it's like everybody's breaking my heart a little bit, because Brown is just professing his love for Sam Cedar, going back to his days with Air America, as the lone voice speaking out against the white right. And I was like, okay, I guess, but it was just such a reminder of what I think are the limitations that are imposed by race on people's intellect. I was around those days. And I remember there were plenty of options to Air America for broadcasting and or otherwise ways to intellectually respond to a Rush Limbaugh or somebody like that. And Air America was soft. I was like, they are so soup sandwich soft. So I was like, man, it's not a, anyway. So it was just a disappointing limitation to see. Yeah, man, come on, man. Let's go. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I mean, I believe so. If you talk about the Instagram joint, from what I could tell and the way I'm going to say she was presenting herself was very aggressive and very, Oh, is Dr. Hall joining early even? All right, so if she's going to be able to join, well, I don't know. We'll see what's going on. Okay, we'll see what's going on. But all right, so then let me we don't need that much time with other stuff. World Cup, Kylian Mbappe. I mean, he's crazy. It's ridiculous how good he is. It's a shame the colonial history that results in him playing for France. But I'll come back. We could come back and talk about Harriet more. I watched that on the flight. I read on the flights and on the, during the trip, I read a lot of Roland Martin's new book. And my one note here is he's checking into Diop and Francis Cress Welsing without attribution, science, data, or radicalism. His whole thing is just about writing to white people about how they need to get over their fear, and black people have to keep voting for the Democratic Party as it's currently constituted, not even some sort of radical. I watched MC Search of Third Base fame, white rapper fame, on Math Hoffa's show. Very interesting discussion. Search comes across as a very cool dude, but he said something that I thought was fascinating, and I don't see it getting picked up in the way other people's comments have been picked up or speak. So MC Search, as a white man and a Jew, made the point in saying that when in trying to correct some of the misunderstanding that even I was caught up in, when Jay-Z, for instance, said in his beef with Nas, you were getting effed, God, I know who I paid, Searchlight Publishing, or whatever it was. In other words, suggesting that, yeah, I used your voice, but you were using it wrong. You made it a hot line, I made it a hot song. That he was paying a white man that owned Nas's stuff. Search was wanting to clear up that, first of all, Searchlight Publishing didn't even exist at that time. Search didn't own Nas's stuff like that. He made 2% off of all the stuff after putting in a lot of work to make Nas's career take off. He points out all the time, Nas shouts him out directly or indirectly in verses, crediting Search with his helping the rise of his career. And then Search goes on to say, I was not going to be the Jew that fucked the black man in the music industry. I believe that's a verbatim quote. And his point was, I was not. Ghana up 2-0. Shout out to Ghana. Go Ghana in the World Cup. Anyway, got their second goal just now. And it is nice to see all these African people cheering in the stands. Anyway, that was actually one of the points I wanted to make. I watched Ecuador play outside of a continental African team, the blackest team, and then you switch over to see the fans in the stands, and it's all white Latinos and just whites. It's like, man, this is anyway. But Search said, I was going to break the mold of the Jew fucking over the black man. Now, they didn't unpack it. They didn't stay with it. They didn't add any political depth to it. They didn't add any of the analysis that I would like to see brought to it. But I haven't seen any loud cry for the cancellation of Search, for the destruction of Search, for the anti-Semitism or the self-hating Jewness of Search. And then he goes on, he even mentions I forgot the executive's name, but he says, I'm not going to be him. I'm not going to continue this tradition of Jews in the industry messing over the black artist, the black man artist, or the artist, black artist. So if he's recognizing a pattern or a tradition, if he's recognizing an institutional relationship that he has to consciously mold break, why is it then that either he's not being held up for criticism, or why we can't hold that up for what I would like to do, an investigation of how those communities end up in that interaction in those spaces in the first place, beyond all the silliness. I just thought that was fascinating. And then they went and then they moved on. And then they moved on. So that was it. That was all I wanted to say. Yeah, no, dude's I didn't know a lot about his story either. And I didn't know a lot about why Third Base broke up. I didn't know that Pete Nice called Search's wife the B word. What? And which is what Search credited with leading to the breaking up of the group. In the 20s or 30s, maybe even in my 50s, that's breaking of the jaw. Goodness gracious, I can't even fathom that one. Honest, that is out of that someone that I would know would address my wife in that way under any circumstance. Oh my God. But Search apparently is in some sense, he's matured. My goodness, I was watching that on the plane, and even I was like, it's too much. So those children aren't black. I'm just playing. Yeah, he's where Search, did you catch a part where Search said his mom helped him get money right after he started to get played in the radio, and his dad regularly went to Wall Street to flip stock? I did. So I'm not sure what your point here is. I'm not suggesting that Search was some impoverished revolutionary. I'm just simply I'm only making the point about Search that I thought he came across as this is the most I've heard from the man my entire life. And I've been familiar with them as a rap group since they came out. What really got my interest was what he said about breaking the mold regarding Nas. And he goes into the whole thing about what he did for Nas's career. He's had a whole thing in fashion, apparently. He's done a whole bunch of stuff that I'm not aware. I don't know. But that was that. And then the one part I also thought was interesting, that he didn't want to share publicly what his drug of choice was that he had to overcome. I thought that was an interesting thing to get quiet about, but what's the big deal? Anyway, but anyway. All right, so let me just share this real quick. I did this too while on the trip. There was one day I got from all these different people sent all these different clips from Killer Mike. Something he said on the Breakfast Club, his Cadillac commercial, his this, his that. So I did. I said, you know what? I'm here in Paris. I'm sitting here. I got a free moment. Let me see if this number from our exchange a couple years ago or last year, whenever that was, is still good, and if he's whatever. So I just texted him and I said, Mike, is this still you? I just wanted to be able to say I reached back out. Jared Ball here. wanting to say directly and with kindness that I cannot disagree more with your public discussions of race, class, and economics. Yeah, no doubt. Rest in peace to Irene Cara. No doubt. No doubt. Speaking of celebrities. Oh, really? Okay. So what's the big deal? I mean, all right. I mean, PCP was no joke. In the DC area, it used to be called the Dipper. And there was even a go-go song. The Dipper. The Dipper. Taking a cigarette and dipping it in that juice. I got a couple juice stories. Like, I don't see what the big deal is. Oh man, one of my many failed attempts at being a teenage drug dealer was getting a bottle of juice from this sister I was in love with in high school, but she had a man, and her man dealt in that substance. So through him, got hooked up. Whoop 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 whoop. I remember we had to share a car. I had gotten it, put it in the back, and if anybody's familiar, there is a smell if you don't package it properly. A good amount of juice in the trunk of a car in a hot summer day when you don't have air conditioning and you got the window down, but the smell is just like it's a lot. And I had to pick up my mother from work, and I remember she was saying, "What is that smell?" And I said, "I don't know. Maybe I ran over something, or maybe the car's got a leak or something." Long story short, tried to mix it into a batch of greens to sell to the white drug community, because black people would do dippers and boat PCP on marijuana in DC, but the white boys in Baltimore wanted greens, which was juice right on the parsley. Right? Parsley? Is that what we were using? Right on one of those kinds of things. Long story short, the batch was mixed wrong. It was way soft. Early bags that were sold had to be replaced under threat of violence. It was just a wild failed thing. So, but I get it. From all sides. It was yeah, so I get that if that was his drug of choice, he would have had a lot to deal with, and he would have been a problem for a lot of people. So anyway. All right. So, oh no, it was far from that. So for all this is hilarious. For all the Nicky Barneses and the whoever's, there's somebody at the other end whose story you never hear, and that's me. That would have been me. There's somebody at the way other end of that, the failed, who just fails at every turn. Whether it's a story like that or just realizing I'm not up for the levels of violence that would be necessary even to be a low level, weed dealer. Like I'm just not interested in any of that. I'm not up for it. I'm not built for that, as they say. So no, it was the exact opposite. I went in the career path that was meant for me. You know what I'm saying? That was not, it was just one L after another. It was hilarious. Actually, that would be a funny thing if I had like a movie studio to make a supercut reenactment of that, like a montage of all the failure. It would be hilarious. Yeah, anyway, so I send this to Mike, and then he ends up responding, like I think almost a day later or many hours later in the day or something like that. I had actually forgotten I sent him the text, and then and he immediately wanted to call. So as I tried to summarize there in that post, and I told him I ignored or said no to the call, and then wrote back and I said, look, man, I can't afford the roaming. And I'm being serious. The 25 cents a minute, I'm not going to get into a multiple hour or even 1 hour phone call with Mike where I know what exactly was going to happen. So I was saying to him, look, I don't want to go through the thing. I don't want to go through the thing that you do. So let's just set up a time to have a public discussion. Because I don't want the off the record, I'm gonna sell wolf tickets and suggest that, Jared, you're soft and a punk and whatever. Very quickly, let me just back up here real quick, because I actually wrote this in order here in my notes, and I'm just not following them. So first of all, I want to say to all those who would say we have to reach out to folks first, that, when we disagree, this is why I'm saying it's not true. We don't need to do that. And in fact, it's often a waste of time, because many people are not interested in a public, principled debate or disagreeable discussion, particularly with people to their political left. And the real issue, as Amiri Baraka once, I think not famously enough, said to Bill Fletcher, is that people don't want to put their ideology on the table. They want to couch things in other claims. They want to wrap it in some other specific issue, but they don't really want to put on the table that their politics are ultimately, at best, liberal Democrat, black capitalist, entrepreneurial, and relatively conservative politics. They don't want to do that. So what I was just trying to explain to Mike was, so I, I don't know. Look, somebody went at me on Instagram, and had he not gotten truly disrespectful, I would have actually been interested. I might have even been willing to engage this criticism, saying, Jared, this is about your ego and this, that, and the third. Okay, I don't know. I honestly don't know. That wasn't what I would have thought it was initially, but okay, I'm open to that being, But what I thought was, what I was interested was that if I'm being asked by what relatively speaking, I don't mean, it's not that many people, but it was from several different people in like rapid succession, it felt like, inviting me to engage Killer Mike material. So I'm saying, if I'm going to respond to him publicly and I actually have his phone number, let me just sort of, as a way to make a point or to cover myself, or to maybe even on the off chance have it happen, and see if I can invite Mike to a discussion, so that no one can say, oh, you just hating on him, you don't want to deal with him, why don't you just call the brother? Well, this is why I don't want to just call the brother, because if you ever do speak to him, and I think several people like him, they become, it becomes a silly waste of time, that where it's not about, I'm interested in hearing your critique and responding to it, or learning from it, or challenging it substantively. It becomes a defensive, you're only critical of me because you ain't me. So, and especially after hearing from him, that couldn't be farther from the truth. So when he says he would go into this thing about, as I try to outline here, he said, I said, man, I can't afford these roaming fees. So I said, I have the same number on WhatsApp. So if we have to talk, which I was saying, look, I really don't want to, because I remember our last conversation and how useless it was. Let's use WhatsApp. And he said he didn't know what WhatsApp was or is, which shocked me, because he was saying at the same time, I travel all the time, roaming fees aren't a big deal. And that's where I responded. I was like, yeah, but I'm not being paid to travel in most cases. I am paying to travel. So let's clarify that. I I'm paying to travel most of the time. And when I am paid to travel, it's, all due respect to the hosts, it's not that much. And I'm not on that I'm not a celebrity. I'm not on that A list of even invited academics. So, and understandable. I get it. So, and then I said, I also don't do Cadillac commercials, which was one of the things that had been sent to me. So I don't have your money. He starts bringing up wives and, assistance with bill paying and all this other kind of stuff and all this. And I was like, look, man, okay, I get it. Like I'm poorer than you. I'm financially illiterate relative to you. Whatever you say I am, will you publicly engage me about these issues? And that's where the whole thing was, I don't need to do that, or I don't, I don't even know if it's appropriate. Then he started leaving all these voice messages, and I told him I was going to stop reading or listening to them, because it was more of the same kind of, because I said, but really, we don't need another call. You won't come on my show for a full discussion, and I don't want another phone call, which I found so disingenuous. Then he does this whole thing of I didn't wake up with you on my mind, so I wasn't even aware of why you texted me and what I had and I was like, and I'm like, it's not I'm waking up waking up with you on my mind. It's that people had been sending me all this stuff, all that kind of stuff. So long story short, it's really, even as I'm starting to read through it again, it's kind of seriously. He said he would reimburse me for the call if I wanted to. And I was like, nah, thanks. And then he just started sending all these voice messages about, then he started telling me to go to the Louvre and learn about how they steal our African history and, stop bothering me and go enjoy your time in Paris like I do when I'm there, and this, that, and the third. I was like, okay, man, So anyway, all that to say, one of his points was about what the black community has done for Cadillac historically to justify the commercial, which he said he had done a year ago. So whatever I was seeing was late. And I was like, I get it. But my point would still be the same. Unfortunately, even when well-intentioned, and I don't know what his intentions are, my point was still, in response to those who were sending me all these things, would be, in addition to whatever the humor was in the messages, was similar to what I said even about Colin Kaepernick when he did the Nike commercial. Whatever people may feel is their need, the message, the relationship with those institutions, and the symbolism overrides all of the political work that they're doing. And it undercuts all of the political work that they're doing. Again, it's the same argument, from whenever. The trappings of the capture of symbolically of a radical figure that is then represented or back to a mass audience in connection with an established mainstream powerful institution, Nike, Cadillac, broadly speaking, the automotive industry. It undercuts everything else that might be seen as being some sort of progressive messaging. The stuff he was saying about economics on the Breakfast Club recently, apparently, about black people more or less ignorantly not doing what others' communities have done economically, and that being the primary problem, is just wildly inaccurate. His discussions about Wall Street, again, wildly inaccurate. And it's the Andy Young effect in his case that causes that. So what else did I put here? There was no sincerity, no willingness to speak publicly. The whole thing. Then he goes to the manhood stuff, right? Suggesting, because he did the whole thing of saying. So this was the point. Like he did the reverse, or sort of, I guess, the inverse of what others do from the other side. So in other words, if I'm critical of someone, I get this commentary back to me. Well, you should have reached out to them and had an off the record conversation. But I'm responding to what they're saying publicly. So I'm not taking private conversations and sharing them publicly. I'm responding to them. In this case I am, but I'm not initially, I'm responding to their, but even that is ultimately my response to their public presentation and my attempt to engage them publicly about their public presentation. I'm not looking to talk about Mike's private life or any of that stuff. I'm not looking to talk privately with him about what he does public, because it doesn't in any way complicate, negate, or challenge what he does publicly. And this is part of the tactic that he uses. He'll call, and then you'll have this conversation off the record that is supposed to quell and make quiet the left-leaning criticism of what he does publicly, so that he can always say, well, I met with the Panthers. I talked to radical lunatics like Jared Ball. I even took his call and answered his texts. I'm a man of the people. But you won't sit down and publicly engage. So the inverse of that is that he starts going into this thing about manhood being connected to being willing to call someone and talk to them man to man if you have a problem with them. And I'm saying the same thing. I did that with you. It was disingenuous. And ultimately, it's not my point anyway. It should be a public discussion, because I'm very Daruba with this. If it's not tactics or strategy, everything should be on the table. What we think ideologically, politically, what criticisms we have of one another, all of that should be in terms of our work and our public work, not what pictures I take with my family. But everything else. So that's what I was trying to say with Mike. We should just talk publicly, but he's not interested in that, and he would never do that, not just with me, but with anybody to his political left. So, anyway, it was a silly exercise. I get it, but it really does make the point that I've always wanted to make about this, that there's no real point in engaging folks like that publicly, or privately. It's just good. It's just valuable to produce a critique of what it is that they're doing. I guess that's all that we can really, there's no real point in. But this whole thing, real men, so what am I supposed, like, what response does he really want from that? And then I start walking through the scenario. So what happens? So I buy, I accept his Wolf tickets, and I say what? So I'll fly to Atlanta and we'll sit down at a place of your choice and meet face to face. And then what? He tries to intimidate me. He swings on me. He does worse. What? Then what? Or we just talk then? Is that really what would happen? I don't know. What would, anyway. Yeah. And it worked. I'm going away. That's that. But anyway, but as I said from the beginning, part of my interest in that was to be able to say, this is what happens when you do try to call someone, and reach out to them privately. That ultimately all that they want to do is keep away from a public discussion. And this is what all of this should be, public discussion. You tapped into his super ego, the substance of meek millionaire dreams and nightmares fear their own contradictions. Okay, right on. Thank you for that. That makes sense. But he was classing me up. You can't afford your phone bill? Don't you have a wife to help you deal with that? It's like, man. Like, Uh, um, no, if I'm reading your context correctly, I wanted it to be a public discussion. I would like for it to be a public discussion, but there's no real interest in that. So, yeah. Anyway, so let me double check on Dr. Hall here real quick. I thought she was trying to make it on. So let me explain just real quick as I do that. Big shout out to Dr. Herbert Brewer at Morgan State University, who put me on to Professor Hall's work and was talking about all this new scholarship and new forms of scholarship that I needed to be put up on, and suggested her book Wake. And I'm very grateful for that. And then Quaker anarchist said on Twitter, I don't know why do I keep doing that. On Twitter, I think it was you who did that. Put us in connection, Dr. Hall and me in connection on Twitter, saying you all should, somehow link up or whatever. And I jumped on Twitter and was saying, I happen to actually be reading your work right now. I'm very excited. I'm all in love with the work and this, that, and the third, blah, blah, blah. So we quickly tried to start. I said, so I'm traveling now, but I'll be back Monday. Can you join me as soon as Monday? And then I didn't realize the time difference. She's West Coast. It's early. There was some technology. So in other words, we might have just been in a rush. I might have just been in a rush. Right. It only works with Chrome. It only works with Chrome. Yes. So I told her, I said, look, it's no stress. It's an open-ended invitation. We can set up for another time. We can, make time once the semester ends to pre-record, if not live or whatever, or just do a special live some other time. In other words, it's not that deep. And then I tried to, started to try to quickly organize some of the thoughts that I was thinking, these other ones that I just struggled through the last hour. And so I'm not sure we're going to make this work this morning. And then Dr. Hall said, so we said, I don't think I can do it. Then it looked like she could do it. And now it looks like she can't again. So, but we'll definitely have the conversation, because just the topic, the book, to be fair, the book would have had to have been like a complete disgrace for me to not want to engage it in some sort of positive way, or to not be biased. Women-led slave revolts is, you had me at the title. You know what I'm saying? It was, but, and I want to ask her about this. Wait a minute. 1 second. It's not working with Chrome. I'm sorry, I don't have more to say on that. I don't know why it's not working with Chrome. I will, Blood Honey, and when we work this out with her, to have her, wait so we can watch Korea Ghana. No, I do have it on in the background. It's halftime. I think it's still 2-0 Ghana. Yeah, StreamYard. Yeah, let me make that recommendation real quick. Thanks, Coco. Do you have Firefox? It works also. But the book is as much about, or I'm going to ask her about. It feels as much about her experience writing or doing the research on this history as it is about the specifics of the history itself. Which, as an academic, as one who has struggled with the institution, I am fascinated by. And I also am very interested in asking her what she thinks of the Woman King film after her discussion of Dahomey and the women warriors. But anyway, I hope we can work this out. And yeah, she got a sensitivity warning on Twitter, which I love also. And I'm like, and again, the book isn't like it's not, maybe, to some of our dismay, it's not page after page of women in rebellion and doing this and that and violently doing this and that and this and happen and this and, it's not that. It's not that. So the sensitivity warning is simply that, not that it needed that much help, but that as Elon Musk and them drag that space farther to the right, anything that references revolution is going to be of concern. And this is sort of another overriding theme in some unfinished or incomplete and never done work of my own that going back to that point I was trying to make with that one semester in class about violence in film. And the one form of violence you're sure not to see in film is revolutionary violence, particularly if victims of that violence are European. So, but in just reading about her experiences in trying to do the research and where you have to go to get the research done, it's fascinating in and of itself. And then when you do get to some of the specifics of how and why women were in position or inclined to lead these revolts, and of course to at least raise the question, I don't think she doesn't really investigate this part of the question, but to raise the question of why we aren't encouraged to learn more about women in their role in these revolts and why we don't do enough to talk about it. And why, as I admitted to her on Twitter, that I had not even, and I think even admitted here, I have not even considered the question at all. Now, I think I have a forward progressive reason for that, which I'll ask her about when we work this out at some point. But it that doesn't mean I'm right, and it could very much be a part of that same lingering patriarchy or some form of it. So anyway, she also mentions in her book, the book Beloved by Toni Morrison. I saw the movie, but I'm wondering if any of you have read the book. I've never read the book. And if any of you have read the book and what you all thought of the book. She, right, it's a graphic novel. Which I think is a great way of storytelling, Yeah. And in that documentary that Robert Townsend made about Sam Greenlee's film, to see the late Sam Greenlee talk about how they had to guerrilla film that film. Nobody wanted that to be discussed. Thank you, Ricky. Okay. And thank you for the precision in just how much better the book is. I assume the book is better just because books are almost always better. I can't think of anything where the movie is better than the book, maybe except for The Godfather. Although the book, I probably can't say that because the book, I can't say that But it would have to take like I don't know. That's a good question. Is there an example where the movie is better than the book? I don't know. That's interesting. I agree. It's not done enough. It's not done enough. But the particular issue, of course, that Hall references in her work is this issue of course, that horrible decision of would you put your child to death before allowing that child to be enslaved? And whoa. Ooh. Oof. Oof. Movie better than the book? I don't know. I never read the book. But maybe. Of course it did, Emma. That's why Emma, I think at best we could be comrades. I don't think we could be friends. More than anything you've said about me personally or anything else, I think that's our dividing line right there. Yeah, I'm like, nah. It's riveting, but with all due respect, that points more to the dividing line. You know, all the shots you've taken at me personally, that's it right there. That's woo. That would be a good test. Get a room full of adults who have had relatively, you know, the same amount of enough sleep, put them in a comfortable, you know, and have them watch The Godfather. And everybody who's asleep, you fail. That would be my mission test for whatever my mission was. You fail. So listen, oh man, I honestly wish I had done more to prepare in terms of, but once I thought Dr. Hall was coming on, I just dove deeper into her book and didn't prepare much more to say. Like for instance on Roland Martin's book, which is fascinating. Yeah, I have to. That would be it. And really, the only debate there for me is one or two better than the other. Like that's the only argument I'm really willing to entertain when it comes to The Godfather. You know, yeah, that's it. There you go. That's it. I like that line. Oh no. To be honest with you, if I was in my 20s or even my 30s, I would have been up for that. I would have even probably been able to be talked into that. Absolutely, but not now. Oh no, and especially after the way I feel, just flying around and standing on line at an airport. No, I'm not swinging on anybody unless it's for real and in self-defense and with the worst of intents. So I don't want that smoke. I don't know. But that's sort of my point. I want the public engagement to be about politics and ideology, history. One time, and for folks familiar with PFW, they might remember. One time, I almost was willing to do this with a white boy that worked at PFW. He talked out a line in the beef with the radio station. He had said some things. He sold some tickets, and I was like, "Let's get in the ring." And I even had at the time, a hang from the ceiling bag that I used to work out on. And it would have been silly. One of my few close friends did remind me, you can't really do that, right? Like you have to see how absolutely absurd that would be for you to do that. But I was like, in that moment, And I will say this: I beat that bag off the wall. It broke it. It's no longer usable. But it would have been absolutely silly. So at this point, a good 10, 15 years. How many years has it been? That would be absolutely ridiculous. And I don't know how I don't know how nice he is with his hands. Oh, hold up. Pause break. Let's get busy. Don't go anywhere. She came to save the show. I had descended into to end of show madness. Don't go anywhere. We say
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Oh, good morning.
Dr. Rebecca Hall, good morning. Hi. Welcome to the program.
Let me pull up.
I love the sunglasses. Let me pull up my notes here to give you a proper introduction. Dr. Rebecca Hall is an independent scholar, activist, and educator. Her paternal grandparents were born enslaved. She writes and publishes on the history of race, gender, law, and resistance, as well as articles on climate justice and intersectional feminist theory. Her most recent book, Wake, The Hidden History of Women-Led Slave Revolts, has won multiple awards and was a finalist for the NAACP Image Award and the Pan America Open Book Award. Wake has been listed as a best book of 2021 by NPR and the Washington Post, Forbes, and Miss Magazine. Her work has been supported by numerous grants and fellowships. She is a 2022-23 Radcliffe Institute Fellow, and most importantly, not yet added to her bio, she is a guest on I Mix What I Like here at Black Power Media. So there we go. I'll just play. Welcome, Dr. Hall. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. I'm moving into my office here at Harvard. And it's nice having an office. I haven't had an office in a really long time.
So you are on this coast then?
I am, but it was still like too much. It was
okay.
Too early. I had to drag my black ass out of bed this morning because I was so tired to come here. But I'm here.
Well, I appreciate it. I definitely appreciate it. And I know our guests do because, except for those who left early, they're going to have to come back. Because I admit I was descending into flight exhaustion, travel exhaustion, madness. But that said, again, I want to before we move forward, I want to again shout out Dr. Herbert Brewer as South Korea has pulled to within one against Ghana in the World Cup. Everybody, just in case anybody else has it on in the background, unfortunately. Shout out to Dr. Herbert Brewer at Morgan State University for encouraging me to look into your work. And I'm late to it, obviously, but happy to have caught up to it. And, you know, we were talking about it in the chat a little bit before we get into it, you know, and I know you talk about this in the interview you have published, included at the end of the book. You talk a little bit about this, but could you share with us a little bit about your choice of a graphic novel for the book?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I love graphic narratives, and especially really powerful memoir. Just some examples. Like I found Mouse by Art Spiegelman really inspirational. There's this incredible book called The Best We Could Do. I don't want to mispronounce this woman's name. She's a Vietnamese refugee talking about her experience. So it's a really powerful medium, but I never thought in a million years that I would create one. And it really is like creating. I mean, it's writing, but it's almost like doing this, a graphic narrative like this is almost like doing a production, you know, like it's just crazy. There's so many parts to it. And so I had, so what happened was I had been fired once again for mentioning that the white administration at this high school I was teaching at, you know, was white. I was like, you know, the white administration at Cottonwood High needs to be more sympathetic to the issues of refugees of color. So that got me fired. They're like, you called us white. It's like, but you are white. But anyway, so I was just done. I was done with academia. I was done with trying to teach. I taught high school for several years, got fired multiple times. And so I'm like, I'm done. You know, what do I regret most about this failed academia career? And it's like that I did all this research that was really important to me. I mean, 4 years full time, you know, to research and write this dissertation. You know, I published history articles based on the research, and I think probably 20 people have read any of it. So I'm like, how can I make this material, which is pretty complex, also be accessible? And that's what I thought, graphic narrative. So, and there are a lot of things about the medium that are very generative. But before I go into a long lecture, we can just go back to your questions, though. I mean,
you touched on something else I want to ask you about as well. What you shared about your academic experience, both just now and even in your book, unfortunately, are reminiscent or triggering, maybe, or button pushing for me personally. So I definitely wanted to ask you, you know, and even in your bio, as you're self-described as an independent scholar, you know, what does that mean, and what made you leave the institutional academic world? So I did. If there's more you want to share about that now or later, I was hoping you would.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about that. I have to figure out a way to talk about this briefly. Like, how do I get this out in like 2 minutes? Because
I know that's right.
Yeah.
Take your time, though. I want you to take out. And one day, you know, if you ever, you know, anyway, we can always have you back, but and maybe make that the focus so we can maybe more focus on your book. But yeah, I'll take the 2-minute version now. But yeah,
I'll try with the 2 minutes. So, you know, I practiced law for 8 years. I was a tenants' rights attorney. And I got really burned out and fed up with the legal system. I talk about it in my book. I mean, not that I was enamored with it before I went to law school, but I thought there were some basic things that I could get done on behalf of my clients. So I left that and went back to school and I got my law degree at Berkeley. Then in '89, I graduated. And then so after 8 years, I went back to school to get my PhD in history. And my goal was to be a history professor. But, you know, the jobs were really sparse. Like, I graduated in 2004. And, you know, academia is such a minefield of white liberal toxicity. And, you know, I'm a nice person. You know, I try to be, you know, considerate. And it's interesting being back here. I mean, being back here in academia, like I'm here for a year. As an independent scholar, I live from grant to grant. So when people ask me, what does it mean to be an independent scholar? It's like, I don't know, I'm making it up as I go along, right? So I'm here, you know, for a year, and I'm with like 50 other fellows, and they're amazing. This is like an incredible opportunity. But they're all kind of like damaged by their academic experiences. I mean, anybody who's a radical, man, if you want to know more of the details, this audio drama that I did where DeWanda Wise stars as me, I'm still tickled about that. Let me see if I can find the brochure. Hold on.
Sure. And just so you know, linked in at least the Kindle version is a link to the audio drama, which I've not yet heard. So I'm glad you're bringing it up for us to talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it tells the story. It tells the story of how the book came into being. And it takes like 4 firings and kind of condenses them to 2. But the where I got fired from the University of Utah School of Law, that's detailed, you know, with specificity, you know, every messed up thing that happened. I don't know if you've heard the story of Derek Bell's teaching.
Oh, yeah. And Dr. Hall, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to share again, not only am I familiar with it, but at one point some years ago, I read almost all of the transcripts, the submitted papers, the statements on all sides. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like of the stature.
Either one.
No, but I had the same kind of I had very similar things being undermined, being, asking for teaching evaluations, being told. I mean, I've taught a lot. Like I taught at UC Santa Cruz where I was getting my PhD. I had a postdoc at Berkeley Law for 2 years. And my teaching evaluations have been everything from, okay, she makes us read too much, to this is life-changing, And these teaching evals were like, and I was teaching criminal procedure, constitutional criminal procedure, right? That's the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments to the Constitution. And anyway, so they were like, and I was warned by a faculty person who had tenure, whatever you do, don't teach race. And I'm like, they brought me here from Berkeley to teach race. I was specifically brought here by the dean who asked me to come and teach race. And she's like, these students are haters. Just take my word for it. Every time you teach race, make a note in your calendar. I'm like, okay. And so I did that. And, I managed to not only brought up race 5 times in a semester of a class of constitutional criminal procedure that met every day. And then I get these teaching evaluations like, she shoved race down our throat every day. I used to have empathy for the African-American defendant. I'm like, what? And they all...
I used to.
Yeah, I used to. And it's just... So it was like being thrown to the sharks because all this happened without any support. So, I mean, the details are in this audio drama. You can get it on Audible. But yeah, so academia. I'm very radical.
Yeah.
I don't really quite fit in.
No, I get it, and I unfortunately I get it. So anyway, so you, which in part is how, or I want to both say this is in part what led you to the work in Wake, but it's also in part the work in Wake is also in part what led you to have some more struggles with academia, if I have that timeline correct as well. No, at least the content. But anyway, go ahead. Okay, correct me then. Yes, please. Go ahead.
So Wake, I mean, I started writing that in 2017, basically. So I had been fired from teaching high school. I was long away from, I mean, I hadn't, I refused to adjunct. And so I hadn't taught like in academia proper for probably, I don't know, 6 or 8, maybe 8 years before that. And so I was just done. I mean, the system was done with me. And then, so that's, how I wrote this book. And being around all these, academics, they're like, how did you write a book like that? Like, I would love to do something similar, but, it's never going to get me tenure. And it's like, these aren't things I need to worry about. What I need to worry about is that I don't have a retirement account and I'm 60. I still have student loans, And, people think you make a lot of money with these books. I mean, maybe if you're Stephen King, you do, but, we're not going to make anything. Hugo and I aren't going to make anything on this book for like maybe 10 years. Seriously. So, yeah.
Right on. Well, so let's so as I was saying to the chat, and Ghana has just gone ahead again 3-2. So shout out to Ghana.
Watch this. I can't watch the World Cup.
Tell me why. Yeah.
Because of all the shit, like in terms of how it was built. Am I allowed to swear?
Oh, no question. Oh yeah, you are. You're perfectly fine, and you're perfectly fine to be critical of the World Cup, and to even be critical of my contradiction, which I acknowledge is because you're right. And
I've seen some really radical brothers be like, "I'm going to watch the World Cup." I'm like, man, yeah.
No, it's terrible. It's terrible, and
I'm just not following it. So.
No. It's terrible. We've talked about the background. We've talked about, at least mentioned a little bit of the contradictions in terms of race, class, who's in attendance, what's happening in Qatar, and all of that. But I'm here for it. I accept all of the criticism for that. Just don't post it on pictures of my children on Instagram, people. Not to you, Dr. Hall. I'm referencing something else that was. That I was talking about earlier. Save your criticism. Yeah, there was people criticizing using the comment section on pictures of my children, of our travels to unleash their dissertations of critique, and I was just like, save it from me, leave it off of those. Anyway, but So, but one of the points that the questions that I had for you that I mentioned to the folks in our chat just a minute ago before you joined us was, and maybe use this as a segue to talk about the specifics of Wake, which is very exciting. But I admit that when I the moment I saw the title, I was expecting or wanting, I should say, page by page, blow for blow of all the details of women in revolt historically against enslavement and colonialism, and but admittedly, I was surprised and even happily surprised because of my own selfishly experience in academia to see that a lot of the book is about your struggle just to complete the research. The struggles of a Black woman wanting to research about Black women, specifically those engaged in struggle, the highest levels of struggle. So, but if we could, so let's just start there. The discussion of Wake, what you are sharing with us and exposing to us, but even this issue of the book being as much about your engagement in producing the research or conducting the research as it is about the specifics of what the research reveals.
And it turns out that part was crucial. That part was, so initially when I was, writing the script for the graphic narrative, I'm like, these stories and these sources are so sparse and scattered and confusing. Like, I need to be a narrator in this book to explain what's going on just historically in these sites, like revolts on slave ships during the Middle Passage, the 2 revolts I talk about in New York City, colonial New York City, one in 1708, which I uncovered, one in 1712. But then I was there in the book as a narrator. And once I was there, I'm like, well, now I need to tell the truth. I need to talk about what this research process was like. And so that wasn't so much about academia as an institution as it is just about general racism and misogynoir. So, and I'm glad I did that research. It was difficult. I talk about it there. But I think what's really resonated for people, because what surprised me, I've been basically on a book tour since the book came out, everywhere. I mean, like Norway, just crazy. Like, and people much younger than I was expecting are reading this book. I was targeted at adults, and, I figured it could be used in a high school, 11th grade US history class or whatever. But like 9th graders are reading it. This 11-year-old girl in my building was like, "Oh, are you Dr. Hall? Did you write Wake?" I'm like, "Yes." It's like, it was a really good book. I'm like, okay. So I think it's about the journey, it's about the process. Yeah.
No, right on. So anyway, I don't know if you wanted to say more about what you talk about in the book in terms of the struggles you had at for instance, as I put here in my notes, you said that, and I liked actually the way you described this, that when you showed up, well, first of all, you make the point that to do the history or to study the history of what has been done to African people, you have to go paradoxically to the archives of the people who did it. And then sometimes the people who are presiding over those archives are acting like modern day forms of the people who committed the initial crimes, which is why you describe going to the British Museum as a crime scene, which I thought was a very apt description. And I wanted you to say more about why that description is appropriate and why you said that and what your experiences were going there to learn about these primarily African women who were in revolt.
Yeah. And I wrote that whole, for the graphic narrative, I wrote about my experience there way back in 2002 or whatever, when I was doing this research. So I'm sorry, what did you want me to address?
I'm sorry. That's probably my fault. That's definitely my fault. It was. I wanted you to talk about why showing up at the British Museum you felt it was necessary to describe it as a crime scene.
Well, because it is.
And then,
I mean, everybody knows that now, right? I mean, it's like, you know, the British Empire, man. You know, the sun never sets on the British Empire. You know, it was the historically largest, you know, empire in U.S. I mean, American. Wow, global history. You know, and they were responsible for over 80% of the transatlantic slave trade in what we call the long 18th century, and their presence all over the world has resulted in them stealing people's stuff, precious stuff from all over the world. You know, jewels from India and people from, I mean, it just is nonstop. So it is a crime scene. And, you know, I was in Greece a couple years ago, which I had wanted to go my whole life. It was amazing. But, you know, you see this, that they, you know, the British took the marble facing off of the Parthenon and it's sitting in there in the British Museum library.
oh, that's right. Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're just.
And the Greeks they wanted it back.
They've been wanting it back. They've been asking for it back. It belongs to them, you know? Yeah, it's just crazy. It's crazy. But I think like progress on people getting their stuff back.
Okay, right on.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. You also mentioned it's sort of a passing thought, but it loomed large for me, particularly because I was reading this while in Paris dealing with diasporan Africans. And there's a part where you were saying that the Africans in London were telling you that you were being treated somewhat better because the Brits knew you wouldn't be there long. So I did want to invite you to say a word or two about that experience and the differences in the way imperialism tries to play the diaspora off of itself.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's a whole other subject. But I think that it always amazes me that people who are, look, I'm an American descendant of slaves, right? But so are the people in the Caribbean, you know, so are the, you know, and Black people around the world, Black Brits, all, you know, I'm not saying our struggles are the same, but we are definitely connected. But so, yeah, that was the sense, you know, that I got. I had like, you know, some Black Brit friends, some scholars of mine telling me that. Like, I'm like, the people are so nice to me here. And they're like, yeah, it's because you don't live here. They can hear in your accent that you'll be leaving soon, you know? So.
Yeah, right on. So, and you also talk about something that came up in discussions with this African diaspora that I met with in France this past week about, and they were making the. I'm sorry.
My book is in French. Can you see?
Oh no! Hold on. That's what's up.
Yeah.
Right on.
It's in German too.
Wow! Congratulations.
It's coming out in Turkish, Japanese, and Korean. Who thought? Like,
damn.
I'm still not quite getting how it's resonating like that. It's great, but
yeah, that is well part of what. Well, and I had just added, you know, similar to this diaspora question, I just added in my notes here that I wanted to ask you about. Is it because the you know, one of the points I was making earlier was that I had, you know, people are sometimes critical of, well, why would an African descended person go to Europe for any, you know, instead of going to the continent, as if it's either one or the other. But one of the points I was making was that there's a diaspora everywhere. So I was wondering if part of what is resonating in terms of your book's popularity is the diaspora in other parts. We could maybe speculate as to why Europeans of various backgrounds might appreciate the work, but is to what extent is it the diaspora in your travels that you think is being spoken to?
Right.
Yeah. Did that make sense? I hope that
it does make sense. And and you know, and it's funny because I don't quite know all the. Why does that keep happening? I don't know quite what is drawing people in Japan and South Korea and Turkey, I don't think it's about the diaspora. France very well could be, and so could the German one. But I think that there's something that resonates, I guess, with people fighting back. I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to that. So, yeah.
Right on. Let's hope so. So but this point I was getting to was that apparently some of the same discussion of France's involvement with enslavement is similar to what you describe in your book about the Brits, where they only want to focus on the point at which they engage in abolition, not in the act of enslavement, leaving out, you have to first enslave before you can abolish.
Right. Thank me for taking my knife out of your back. Thank me for that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And so you talk about that, and then also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just this whole abolition thing. Yeah. So I may be too tired to go into all this, but the British did compensated abolition, so they paid slave owners back for taking their property, and we've never been paid back, and there are people in the UK that I really believe, white people who were really opposed morally to slavery. There's incredible work about, like, for example, white working class women who organized boycotts against, sugar and all kinds of things. But that, I feel like the dominant point of England, committing to abolition of the trade and then patrolling the whole Atlantic, to free captives, and is that it also gave them a way to project their power all across the Atlantic, right? And, the economy was shifting in a way. I mean, all of the ill-gotten gains from empire, from slavery, from colonialism, it funded the empire, in its transition. So, into more industrialized work. So, it's complex, but I feel like I have like an ear for like how historical narratives get framed in a way that just keeps reinscribing white supremacy. It's like that's almost like my special talent. It's like I'm in the middle of writing another book, and it's like I'm in the point where it's like, flow, but the flow is becoming a flood. I'm annoying myself. I can't even watch something on TV. I'm sitting there like re-editing it for, it's like, oh, they should have done more transition there. Why did they make that casting choice? It's like I can't even enjoy anything. So.
Again, similarity. But given what you just said, let me work backwards against my own notes here and say, so given what you just said about the framing of narratives that reinscribe white supremacy, I was very much interested in what you would then have thought of the Woman King, given what you wrote about those same women in your book here.
Yeah, that's interesting. When that movie was being made, I was so worried about, this is complex history with the Agoji, because in the 18th century, the 1700s, they, as part of the Dahomey army, were instrumental in, capturing people and selling them in the transatlantic trade. A lot of that was in the context of wars, and these are war captives, and a lot of the wars are being fought, at European instigation with European tools and machinations and whatnot. But so I was worried, and I think a lot of scholars were worried that the movie was just going to celebrate the Ogoji as women warriors and how empowering that is, without telling the truth about the history, the backstory. But then I went and saw it in the theater with actually a fellow who's a scholar from West Africa, from Nigeria. And, we watched it, and it's like, first of all, the film is in a different time period. It's in the 1800s. The issue of Are we participating in the slave trade? Should we continue to participate in it? Should we transfer over to palm oil? You know, that those discussions were actually happening then. And the Ahosi were actually participating in this discussion. So I feel like people are, so two things. One, I'm really glad that people are talking about it at all. So there's that. The other thing is that I think that some of the people being so critical of this movie, it's like, why aren't you that critical about other epic films? It's an epic film, you know, like who broke down, you know, Sparta's horribleness, you know, when the 300 or you know, Braveheart or whatnot. So I think that's really interesting. And I saw
this guy. So just to be fair, you know, I was going to say who has two thumbs or what has two thumbs and is equally critical of all these epics as the other. That would be me. Mm-hmm. So because I
just be consistent.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, as long as you're consistent, you know what I mean.
I'm pretty much so I won't. We don't have to have the disagreement or debate here, but I did not like the film and would have preferred the focus be maybe when they went to war with the French. Like, why wasn't that time period selected? But anyway, because I think that the
period was a transitional period, you know, where they're right. So, yeah.
No, fair enough. Anyway, but I just wanted just to put my hand up to say that just to be clear that I did not like the film, but I feel like I am equally consistent with you know my disagreements and worse with all of these films. So, but anyway, but my point was given because maybe I'll go back and you can correct me on this, but as I was reading your discussion of that of Dahomey in that time period and I was thinking again that the Woman King in my head and in my note here, I'm saying the Woman King is meant to negate the potential impact of your work. That it's meant to snatch a woman, women leadership, African women leadership, and sort of take it away from the power that and the inspiration that I get from reading your work, and put it into something that ultimately does not lead to any sort of aggressive conflict with Europeans or leaves the discussion in the African versus African point, which you address in your book about this narrative.
I was surprised that they were saying Africa, all Africa, but the brother, the scholar from West Africa, I was like, who was talking about Africa as a continent in the early 1800s? He's like, there's actually some discourse about it. So I saw it with him, and he enjoyed it very much. But I take your point. I really do.
No, so anyway, so I would just say again, more inspiration for people to read your book. Whether you like The Woman King or not, if you can, then you have to follow up with or add Professor Hall's work to your consideration of the whatever.
Thank you.
So one point.
Never.
Oh no, that is how I read it, honestly, as I was reading that section. And I don't pretend to fully understand all the details of the history you're describing. And I'm not, it was just that. I was just like, this is exactly what we're not meant to get to because of films like that. But
No, I get what you're saying.
You raise a point that I definitely wanted to ask you about this issue of 1 in 10. First of all, that there were one out of every 10 ships carrying enslaved Africans was forced to face a revolt. You said at least 1 in 10.
At least, yes.
And that
I'm reaching
often. I figured you were grabbing something, but that often, and I don't remember if you ascribe a percentage to this or not, but often enough, at least, these routine revolts were led by women. And then you talk about the conditions on those ships that would explain why women were often in those leadership positions. And I definitely wanted you to bring that up, as an example of what you do in your book for us to talk about.
So first of all, I think it's important to note that the research that showed that there were 1 in 10 ships, there was a revolt documented. I didn't do that research. That was research done by quantitative historians who created a database, which is now to 36,000 slave ship voyages. It's online. It's the transatlantic database, and you can search it, which is cool. But so when these historians did this, the first thing they asked the query, the database, is how many ships had revolts, and they found that 1 in 10 had a revolt, which surprised everyone because the conditions are almost impossible, on that kind of thing. And then the question became, well, what's the difference between the ships that had revolts and the ships that didn't have revolts? Like, what is the difference? And what they found is that the more women on a ship, the more likely to be a revolt. But then they immediately dismissed their own findings because mainstream historians' position is that women didn't participate in revolt, right? That was a manly enterprise. It was a masculine enterprise. So I think that what I found when I was doing the research, and this is one of the things I think people need to understand, is like when you do critical historical research, you need to ask yourself, what are these documents being created for, right? Who is it speaking to? Who's the audience? So all this detailed documentation about revolts on ships were created for insurance purposes because companies like Lloyd's of London got their start insuring slave ships and the slave trade. And one of the things they would insure against was something called the insurrection of cargo. And so I wanted to look, and that required these ship captains.
And that was the title of your chapter, right? It was. Something about the
insurrection of cargo. That phrase always just like, I don't even know what to say about that. So it got me to the UK and going through, and so the British slave trade was highly regulated in terms of how ships were run. And, and when the ship was on the coast of Africa, everybody was in chains below deck, all the captives, because they were worried about cutoffs, right? Where people would, come from shore, attack the ship and free the captives. But as soon as the ship was loaded and they went into the Atlantic, then they moved the women, they unchained the women and put them on the deck where the weapons are. And it was actually a policy of how to run the slave trade, was to keep women unchained on deck.
So the beauty of it is, and I didn't want to show too much of the book because I want to encourage people to get it. But the beauty of it is, and it's well depicted in graphic display. What I loved about it, given, and again, I'm reading this through my own limited eyes and the politics of today, and in all of the discussions we're having today about gender and identity, and it often seems at conflict and at odds, I actually love this idea that, fine, you're going to categorize a group of people and identify their womanhood as being inferior and soft, fine, because as soon as they get a chance, they're grabbing weapons and they're giving it to the men. They're freeing the men. And then the men, as you depict are happy to then quickly accept the new role for their manhood and say, fine, you have freed us. Thank you. Pick up those same weapons and get busy. And I just love that.
Thank you. I mean, I read hundreds of slave ship captains' logs. And I mean, it's incredible how oblivious. It's like, there was one, I wish I had put it in the book, but there wasn't room. There was this revolt on a ship called the Little George, which was an entirely successful revolt, by the way. I love those stories. Like, they killed everybody but the navigator.
Got to get somebody to get us home, right?
When I was in Norway and I was telling this story to a high school auditorium, they're like, and they're like, so Dr. Hall, are you saying that the takeaway is never kill the navigator? And I'm like,
save the driver. We need a pilot.
Mm-hmm. It's like, no, don't quote me, as that's my main point. That's the takeaway. But anyway, the captain's describing the revolt and the way I literally gamed this thing, like tabletop gaming, and what he's describing, he only sees men, but what he's describing was impossible. It's like they can't see it. And occasionally you get letters where I can see where people are warning each other, like, have no trust in the women, or your property here will be but small. Some people were kind of getting it,
And the children, you said they even included, they said the women and the children. So even the kids were like sometimes, and I love that. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking of that Emory Douglas, my favorite Emory Douglas drawing, where it's the back of a woman holding her child that is also holding a gun. You see her holding a rifle, and the child even had a gun. And I was like, I was like, everybody needs to be a threat if we're all being enslaved. So I just love that. Anyway, that's why I was saying I was so amped when I was, and excited on Twitter to reach out and to get this interview together and I appreciate you even, feeling rushed to do it, because I was, on this trip reading it like, I don't know. I love it. I love it. Anyway,
the book or Elon Musk deciding that the cover of my book is insensitive.
So all of it, because one leads to the other. So what has been if any of the ramifications of that, other than like, what does that mean when Elon Musk targets you as sensitive or insensitive, I guess,
showing strong Black women is insensitive, Anyway, I mean, it was just the cover of the book, my pinned tweet, the cover of the book. And then they said, they marked it for, as insensitive.
That's insensitive. It is insensitive to the wealth creation processes that have led to an Elon Musk.
Right,
it is.
exactly.
So shame on you, Dr. Hall.
Shame on me. I'm happy to that shame. I just want to show real quick what I was thinking.
Sure.
So the original art from the book was sent to my office. Like Hugo, my illustrator, and I can't do anything without talking about him. He's incredible.
Right on.
He's an incredible artist. And just to see his art, I mean, he was a full-time pedicab driver when I got him on board this project. It's not like so he thought Simon & Schuster sent him all the original art. I mean, he thought they sent it to me. I thought they sent it to him, and we're like, it's still sitting in the studio. So we got them to send it here, and I had never seen the original art. So look at this is so
wow.
It gives me chills, and
yeah,
the lettering is another layer process. So you don't see the lettering here, but and these are big sheets like this one. People seem to really be drawn to this page. These are really big sheets, and then they get, I don't know how to center stuff on the camera. And then they get reduced in size, which allows for a lot more detail. And I also want to show one more thing, which is
sure.
This is kind of what I'm working on now. I told the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study that I was developing a Black feminist methodology for recovering the agency of Black women in the archive. So that's what I'm working on, is how to use comics as a medium to recover, our resistance. And
are you a comic book fan? Outside of
fan, I read them. I read some of them. I appreciate them, but I'm not like a big nerd, But the relationship between the panel, the elements of the graphic novel, like the relationship between the panel and the gutter, right? So the panel is here, the gutter is the space between. That's the temporal line in a comic. You as the reader almost co-create the story because you're deciding the pacing, where to look. If you want to see every frame of something, you go to a movie, right? But comics requires you to create a very complex, careful relationship with using the frames. And so I actually did this crazy podcast, which I really loved, and it had based on the audio drama. And Professor Saidiya Hartman was saying, Rebecca, you're articulating a theory of time. And I'm like, I am. I read anthropology of time books. I read physics of time books. There is a river, right? It's like I've been connecting with Vincent Brown here. He's an amazing scholar. And, he's like, this is what, he says really beautifully that, when we talk about the West, we talk about Europe and I guess the United States, it's like, and their contributions, but what did Africa contribute? The hundreds of years struggle against exploitation. That's what we bring. And it's powerful. It is really powerful.
By the way, speaking in terms of the time, how you were just discussing time, it made me think of in that first picture you showed of what looks like, I always think of should be this some real superhero.
Oh,
Like
Lele Rising. Yeah, I have it actually tattooed on my arm here. Where is it here?
Oh wow, yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah, but yeah.
But that's that. If I remember correctly, that's the beginning of a chapter where you start talking about the continuity that water allows in the travel of sound and you were doing something with that in terms of connecting over time.
Right. And Lele is the woman who, I mean, she's emerging after dying in this battle, she reemerges, right? And that's the circular part. That's the Afrofuturist part. You go to the past, you grab what we need, to fight for the future where we exist and thrive and help us understand what's going on now, right? I mean, that's the mission. So, yeah, and she's in the beginning of the book, and then you see her, she starts to appear kind of subtly in shadows and reflections for the close reader, and then she emerges fully at the end of the book. Yeah.
Right on. It's
and
very,
the book I'm
very
writing
dope.
now, which I'm so excited about, is
exactly.
It's called Taking Freedom, Black Women and Emancipation. I'm looking at, for example, I'm working on this chapter now about these Black women and men too, people who were just tearing up plantations, just during the Civil War. I have all these letters and journals from, I call them my slave holding Karens, where they're complaining. They're like, I went outside and they had killed all the livestock and had a huge feast, or, I went outside and told them to, that they needed to get to work, and they had built a gallows in front of the house and they pointed it at it every time I asked them to do something. So, the idea that, Lincoln freed the slaves, or that Juneteenth, just don't even get me started on Juneteenth. So that's what I'm working on now. And
no, I want to get you started on Juneteenth. And at some point yeah, you can do it now if you want. By the way, the 10 o'clock, I don't want you to feel rushed. It's not a hard, like we have to end. It's just a general time that I do end. So I'm happy to time check with you if you have a few more minutes.
I have a couple more. Yeah. I need to get.
Sure. One thing, yeah, and shout out to Ghana who just won. Excuse the contradiction yet again. Sorry about that, but it's just I just lost my train of thought. I just messed myself up. That's what I do. That's my fault.
I do that all the time.
No, but you mentioned that one of the things you talk about and I wanted you to elaborate on, if you would, are the forms that revolt would take, the different ways that women would lead these revolts. We talked about the way it would happen on these ships. And by the way, I was just thinking again, having been on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Atlantic, that alone can be terrifying. So the idea that people would have been on a much less technologically advanced ship and then willing to also risk and even end their own lives to revolt against to the vastness of space being in the, and if you've never been on the ocean, to then look up and be in the middle of the Atlantic again, even on an aircraft carrier, it's daunting. It is daunting. So the idea that I fully I'm saying I don't fully understand, but can only on some level appreciate what those Africans were looking at and deciding to confront. But what other forms did you find that women often ended up, taking in terms of leading these revolts?
On the ship? On ships?
Anywhere. I'm happy to hear about all of it. Anywhere.
Well, I feel like, and maybe that's my training as a historian, that, each place has a certain specificity. So, my focus was on this 18th century because my PhD required, because I was getting a PhD in Atlantic world, colonial America. So that was my time period. I was looking, I've always been fascinated by urban slavery and resistance and northern slavery. My paternal grandparents were born enslaved. One was enslaved in Tennessee, another in Missouri. These aren't deep South states. But so it was important for me to ground the book. I mean, I'm from New York originally, so it was important for me to ground the book, in the North, in an urban society. And so, I was looking at 2 revolts in New York. And one of the things in the 1712 revolt that is so fascinating is that most of the people in the diaspora, most of the people who came from Africa to New York, they weren't transshipped from the Caribbean, or they weren't born in New York. Most of them were Akan speakers of the Akan diaspora, which is now in Ghana. And so the Akan, the Asante were quite aggressive in their imperial moves, and a lot of people got pulled into the trade. And so, but you can study the diaspora all over, the Atlantic world, and you can, like, the burial practices that you see evidence in the African burial ground in New York City, are so often Akan. The oathing ceremony that the enslaved people engaged in before the 1712 revolt, Akan. And so, yeah, it's fascinating.
Right on. Absolutely.
And let me just say this one thing about Juneteenth, and then I got to.
Okay.
So,
that's right.
It's the freedom for me, right? Have you seen that? Yeah, of course you have. But the everything about it is wrong. So it creates a national holiday based on the end of slavery, and then dates it and connects it to the Emancipation Proclamation, which didn't free anybody. It didn't free one enslaved person. It was part of a series of what they call, what do they call it? Confiscation acts. It's like a military thing when you're trying to undermine the enemy's war material and capacity. And, and the Emancipation Proclamation, which was issued in, 1863, said any slave in a state of rebellion is now free. First of all, Lincoln didn't have jurisdiction over those states in rebellion, and that left all the border states, that left Washington, D.C. itself. All of these people were still enslaved. And I'm not even critiquing Lincoln. That's not my point. My point is that, so then Juneteenth was a beautiful local Black Texas holiday that celebrated, when the Union Army came and provided the force needed to help to provide support in their effort to free themselves. And instead it gets put in as, you didn't learn about your freedom that happened 2 years ago, and we came to tell it to you because you're stupid. It just drives me nuts. I can't stand that kind of narrative. And so slavery didn't end in this country until the 13th Amendment was passed in December 1865, with that horrible exception in it. But so the whole narrative of Juneteenth is a white supremacist. And, I know a lot of Black people wanted this to be a national holiday, but frankly, I don't know that they thought it through very much, because it doesn't work as a national holiday other than as a tool of oppression. That's my opinion.
I love it. Fully agree. Yeah.
And
so
I would request, like, do you want to talk on our Juneteenth program? It's like, you don't want me to come talk on your Juneteenth program. Trust me.
I do. So I'll be in contact with you again for that next year. And in addition to all the work you have forthcoming, I definitely wanted to stay more in touch and follow up with it. Go back and even read some of the articles you said that I can identify with that not many people see. And I'm very glad you produced some work that will get more attention. One quick question, if you don't mind, I was wanting to ask you this myself since you mentioned it. Were you ever able to hear directly from your grandparents stories of enslavement, et cetera?
Well, so here's the deal, right? The reason why me at 60 had paternal grandparents, like my father's parents, born enslaved, they were each born in 1860, is there was a huge generation skip in my family, right? Of course, the fact that it's possible is the main point, that it's possible to be 2 generations away from enslavement, this thing that happened so long ago. Why do we keep thinking about it?
And has nothing to do with anything today.
Oh, no, it absolutely doesn't. And so my father, though, beautifully. So my father was born in 1898. and he was a Black communist. His pen name is Harry Haywood, and he wrote an autobiography called Black Bolshevik, where he writes down stories from his family's, his parents and grandparents that they told
Wait
him.
a minute. Did you just say you're related to him?
He's my father. He's my
This
father.
is your father?
Yes. What?
I'm often astounded at my own levels of ignorance, so you have to forgive me. And that this is just dropping in at the end.
Well, it's not my, I mean, I was, as a child, I was like, oh, you're the daughter of Harry Haywood. So I'm just like, I have my own thing, you know, I'm my own person. So I don't bring it up a lot, but his writing and his stories he told me are crucial. And, you know, and that's what I was able to put in my book, like the stories about his mother, who he loved so much, and his father, who annoyed the shit out of him with his Booker T. Washington nonsense. So yeah, that's how I have those stories. So my dad, he died when he was 87 and I was 21. It was my 21st birthday, actually. So yeah.
So forgive me for that. And I appreciate what you're saying about having your own thing. So I don't mean to disrespect your own independent, but that was, and I'm hoping you didn't mention this in Wake and I missed that page or pages. Okay. Yeah. I was about to say, so anyway, that's okay. Fair enough.
In his,
go ahead.
Bolshevik, he dedicates the book to his kids and mentions me as, you know, and Becky, which is what I was called as a child. But yeah.
Well, anyway, today is my mother's birthday. Her mother was a Rebecca, so shout out to Rebecca's and Becky's, you know, of a certain stripe at least.
I'm like, you ruined my name, bitch. Sorry, I need to get off. I'm getting punchy.
No, that's what's up. We need to. This is the good part, because that's how I feel about all these damn Jareds out here, from Subway to Kushner. I'm like, stop messing up my name. Anyway, so
thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And I don't know what's going on with Twitter. I'm getting more and more followers. Like my follower count increased by 20% since my thing was
good.
Bad. But I have no idea. Like I've always been so kind of low. I have like, you know, I had like 4,000 followers. I've never been targeted. I'm kind of like, I only on Twitter so I can engage with my readers and talk with other authors. And, you know, that's, so I don't, but so yeah, suddenly, you know, they're coming for me and we'll see, you know.
Well, that's good. All I've noticed about my own Twitter experience is that I get the exact same number of followers as I do unfollowers. So I stay at exactly the same point for it's very weird that as one comes, one goes. So, you know, but look, I'm very happy that you've written this book. I appreciate being even my lateness to your work and definitely want to stay in touch. And, you know, thank you for even, you know, the little gem you just dropped there at the end and everything else in between. And you know, please, you know, anytime you want to come back, just let me know. I will definitely be inviting you, and we look forward to, if nothing else, seeing you for Juneteenth in 2023.
Okay, see you then.
All right, Dr. Hall, thank you. Peace to you, because I know you're willing to fight for it. Take good care.
Okay.
All right, we'll be back in a second, everybody.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right, everybody. Big shout out to Dr. Rebecca Hall and all of you for joining us this morning. Really appreciate that conversation. That was fantastic. And yo, that was a nice little gem there at the end. So shout out to Ghana. Congratulations. And, you know, apologies for my contradictions. And let's keep it moving. There was something that I did quickly want to double back to that I think thank you. Definitely. Anyway, I can't. My bad. We'll have to figure this out. So everybody, please definitely come back tomorrow for both the remix and morning show and the special broadcast at 11 o'clock in the morning in defense of Kevin Johnson. Kalanji is going to host a discussion with Doctors Joy James and Dylan Rodriguez. So please, if you can, jump on and be there in support. And let's see if we can't, I don't know, make at least some more noise for this brother. I hate the idea that he's being put to death, and that also there's not enough noise being made about that and related issues. Of course, all other political prisoners, etc., and so forth. Friday, I'll be back with Geechee and Diallo. I think we're going to talk more about Roland Martin's book. So I'll come back to that then. And whatever I'm forgetting, I hope will be remembered at some other point. And we'll get to that. So I don't see anything in my notes, so that must be it. So, woo! That little gem at the end kind of threw me. I was like, what? Anyway, thanks again, everybody, for joining us this morning. Take care. As Fred Hampton used to say, peace, because we know you're willing to fight for it. Catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like and throughout the BPM platform. Take care, everybody.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.